Final Data is, on its surface, a seemingly simple analog horror project in which the government of what is referred to as United Russia decides to install new and powerful radio towers in the Moscow area. As you can guess, these are no ordinary towers, and soon the people in the city begin to realize that something weird and possibly very dangerous is taking place. Whatever the government is doing, it will lead to catastrophic consequences for the city of Moscow and its inhabitants. And the series of videos tries to show us what the powers that be are trying so hard to cover up. There are some pretty insane twists along the way, which made me radically change my initial opinion on this project and made me want to share it with you. So let's jump in and explore Final Data. Hello there, gang! How you doing? I wanted to quickly pop in to thank you as always for the continuous support and engagement with my videos. It really does mean a lot to me. As always with these analog horror series, I kindly ask you to go and check out the original creator's channel. Maybe drop a like, subscribe, or tell him that I sent you. I'm just some dude trying to bring these projects to a wider audience. The real talent is on their channels, so I think it would mean a lot to everybody if you could go and give them a bit of your time. The links will be in the description. Thank you so much, and let's get back to the video. I've covered a bunch of Russian analog horror projects by now, and one of their main sources of inspiration has always been the Mandela catalog. But Final Data's main point of reference is pretty clearly Manicore's The Monument Mythos. From the editing style, the visuals, the use of music, and even some of the concepts presented in the story. These are some pretty big shoes to fill, seeing as the Monument Mythos is probably one of the craziest and more creative analog horror projects out there. We'll see if Final Data manages to do that. Let's start from the beginning. Moscow Therapy. In 2020, a terrible virus called ATD-12 appeared in the world.
It reminds me of that tragedy.
2021. Over 1 billion people died from ATD-12. The president of the United Russian Territories announces a project that can heal Moscow by special towers. Some nice music starts and we see the special towers in question, their intended locations and their activity radius. The project is set to launch on January 23, 2022, and we see that by that year, over 3.5 billion people have died from the virus. Immediately, we get a video of someone recording the launch day of the towers from their apartment windows. The silhouette of the giant tower comes into focus through the foggy sky. Something seems to spread from it as it makes strained metallic sounds. And then it lights up, activating, and we hear an incredibly loud sound similar to a siren, while the sky changes color. Then we get another loud hit and the video cuts out. On January 23, 2022, Moscow was hit by a huge amount of radiation. The entire central territory was evacuated. All heads of Russian government died from therapy towers, including the president. Special Towers was disappeared by unknown reason. And so we have the first hook. Immediately there's a few things that jump out. First of all, that's just a camera tripod. The author himself said in a post that it was the first image that he found and decided to use it, because this first episode was kind of a random idea he had without putting too much thought into it. I find it pretty funny and somehow very in line with the Monument Mythos. The more we progress and the more you'll notice the similarities. Just like Manicore series, it seems to be set in an alternate version of history. As you can see, we have a virus spreading in 2020, but in this world it did a lot more damage, it looks like. And the country that we read about is United Russian Territories. So obviously an alternate version of the Russian Federation. I'll say outright that I love the fact that we get at least some footage. I always say this, but it makes any analog horror series much more engaging in my opinion. One curious thing about this first episode that you might not have thought about is who's making these videos? Who's writing these messages? From the language used and some of the mistakes, especially in that last sentence, we may gather that this is not some government official, but maybe a Russian citizen who knows something about this whole ordeal. Let's also check out the description for more info. The ATD-12 virus was first discovered at the end of 2019. The virus was very contagious, and after half a year, when the number of infected people was over 2 billion, the infected began to die due to organ failures. Most countries rejected the development of the vaccine and began to take more radical actions. The video was made with the support of the organization Eagle of True. Eagle of True, recognized as an extremist organization and banned in the territories of the UR. Let's keep going and see what else is in store. This one is called Dakhovsky Posad's Mirage, and it starts out in a beautiful 2007 Windows Movie Maker style. Strange event in Dakhovsky Posad. The maker of the clip is speaking directly to the viewer about a personal experience. At the start of 2024, I decided to go on a holiday in the European territory. Until 2022, I used to go there often to visit family. I lived there when this place was still a part of the Central Territory. That's why not much can surprise me there at this point. Then we get a map where we're shown the protagonist's movements, I'm guessing. He goes from St. Petersburg to Dakhovsky Posad. There's a lot of things to unpack just in this little clip. First of all, St. Petersburg is indicated as Svetoy Peterburg, which literally means the same thing. The only problem is that in the real world it's actually called Sankt Peterburg. That's a small difference, but still interesting to point out. We also see that the city is located in an area indicated as Tsete, which I'm guessing means Centralная Территория, or Central Territory, as the protagonist told us before. We also see that the area, which would be roughly occupied by Moscow, is cut off and indicated with a radiation symbol, in line with what we've already been told. And lastly, the place our protagonist reaches, Dakhovsky Posad, seems to be the seaside city of Sochi in the real world, or at least that general area, which at one point at the end of the 19th century was actually called Dakhovsky Posad. So I'm guessing in this timeline they never changed the name? After an incredible transition, the protagonist comments, "It's quite beautiful here." They show us more pictures, then add, "But I noticed something strange while taking the train back." We see a video from the train window. At first, I thought I was just seeing things, but when I zoomed in, I saw this. And we can clearly see what looks like a city skyline in the middle of the sea. I'm 100% sure that this was Moscow. My friends tell me that this was just a mirage. But I still can't understand, why is the special tower visible in the mirage if they all disappeared after the catastrophe? So, alright, for me that's hook, line and sinker. I'm in for the long ride. First of all, if the Monument Mythos influence wasn't clear enough already, the fact that they call it the Special Tower is an obvious reference to the special trees in that series. Second, I want to say that I love how, just like in the Monument Mythos, the intrinsic silliness of the analog horror genre is proudly displayed here. This is something I particularly appreciate because at times these projects can take themselves way too seriously, and that kinda ruins them for me. I think it's more impressive when you can be a bit goofy about it, but still maintain that underlying creepiness. It especially works well when a project plays with absurd concepts like in this case. It's just a nice way to wink at the viewer and tell them that, yes, I know this is all ridiculous, but it's still cool. So, the special towers were activated in Moscow to, allegedly, combat the spread of the deadly virus. Their activation, allegedly, irradiated the whole city, which had to be evacuated and apparently closed off. So why the heck is the whole city appearing in the sea off the southern coast? What kind of strange spatially paranormal mirage is that? Let's check out the description once again. The latest findings show that the owner of the recording was Alexei Rikert, who in 2030 will be in a mental hospital in XT. Bonus stuff for video, a trip to the good old DP 2024 by Alexei Rikert. Two things here. First, Rikert is not really a Slavic surname, which caught my eye. Second, more obviously, he's in a mental hospital in 2030. When is this series taking place? Let's keep going and maybe we'll find out. The following episode is titled Oktod Towers Glow. Let's start from the short description. Sofia Taval's video was viewed by over 1 million people on MyTube, before it was blocked in 2021. Sofia's location as of 2030 is unknown. The video was removed from the MyTube service due to the spread of fake information. We have that 2030 date once more, and we can assume that what we're gonna see is this Sofia's video, deemed as fake information on what I'm guessing is their version of YouTube. I loved Moscow since I was a child. I was born here and I would have kept living here, but the more I live here, the more I start to notice strange and even creepy events. I want to understand these strange things. I might lose my mind, or maybe I might actually figure something out. In any case, I believe that everybody has the right to know the truth. Sofia Taval's 2015. The first piece of evidence is from 2006. We see a news report about the construction of a radio tower, 250 meters tall, constructed in record times thanks to the use of the world's biggest helicopter. The complexity of their work is explained further, with apparently only 2 pilots in the country being qualified for the job. At one moment, though, Sofia points something out. The reporter, while talking about the construction, calls it the special tower. There is also this blink and you'll miss it moment where, for a frame, this appears. The symbol at the start looks like a key, or maybe an unknown from Pokemon, and the rest says, "of the Ember." So is it supposed to be read as the key of the Ember? I'm not really sure. I don't know why Sofia edited this video in such a spooky analog horror way, but whatever. We then fast forward to 2012, and we have a video taken by Sofia herself. We see the moon in the background and then the tower, from which we can see some flashes accompanied by the sound of small bangs. The text at the top tells us, "After 2 flashes, I heard the hum of the antenna." Then we have it at half the speed. Thanks for the arrow, Sofia. Wouldn't have noticed that. And by the way, before we go further, I want to point out that the news report is real. They did in fact build the Oktod tower in Moscow between 2004 and 2006. Sofia then shows us an article about the tower, or maybe somebody's comment on the article. She highlights a few parts of it. These say, 12th of February 2012, the Moscow City State Construction Supervision Committee allowed for the use of the tower in the operation number SB7761 blah 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 and Creepy Tower. We then see the location of the Oktod tower. It's on the northern east side of Moscow. After 2 years, I managed to find clarification about the restructuring of the tower. The instructional video was found in the possession of a worker. And we see the project number from before. It refers to the addition to the tower of modules that allow for the execution of protocol A612. So, first of all, the top of the tower will have to be dismantled and a new one put in its place. Then, object S005 will have to be installed at the tip. Towards the bottom, modules A, B, V will be placed. Warning, don't damage them during the installation. We see more of the blueprints and what looks like encrypted text. It's either that or gibberish. I thought it was a Caesar cipher, but solving it like that still just gives me gibberish. If anybody wants to have a crack at it, be my guest. We then get a MyTube upload from March 20, 2015 called Gleaming TV Tower, in which we see the Oktod tower, well, gleaming. It seems to grow in intensity and everything starts to shake until the ceiling over the cameraman seems to fall through and the video cuts out. I know the effects are not exactly amazing, but I'm not really here for the production value. The next thing we're shown is an article from the same day talking about an unexpected earthquake in Moscow, lasting around 2 minutes, and with a magnitude of around 3 or 4, though it says that around the main building of Moscow's university the intensity was around 7. And then we see the radius of the earthquake and the position of the tower, smack dab in the middle of it. So it should be pretty obvious that this tower too is being used for undisclosed experiments of some kind, and as we see, the consequences of its activation are nothing to scoff at. And it's pretty clear too that the government is in on it, as is always the case with these series. It makes one wonder, doesn't it? The next episode is titled Shabolovka Noises. The description reads, as of 2030, of the missing on Shabolovka, only the body of Artyom Vlasenko was found in a bunker near the Oktod tower. The killer has not yet been found. And once again, Eagle of True recognized as an extremist organization and banned in the territories of the UR. We start with this. From the beginning of the 21st century, United Russia began to pursue an aggressive policy towards other countries, including the northern states of America. Because the government of our country does not try to resist this aggression in any way, our organization will conduct investigations, during which we plan to find out what the OR plans to achieve. And we see a map of United Russia. And it looks to me like some chunks are missing, though different maps might have different shapes, so either that's throwing me off or I'm just missing something very obvious. I'm sure some of you will be able to spot it. Maybe it's just the fact that Alaska is included too. We're then shown the different territories. Central Territory, Siberian Territory, Experimental Territory, Krasnoyarsk Territory, Asian Territory, Alaska-Kamchatka Territory. There's probably something either funny, creepy, or just weird in this separation of territories, which is flying over my head. Well, not counting the obvious experimental territory, of which we'll never really get an explanation. And I think that this was the place to which our man Rickard was sent. You know, the XT mentioned before. So this time we have chapters. The first one is about missing people. We start with Alexander Panov. Green Eyes, 6'1", went missing on November 19, 2003. Then Grigory Bondarenko. Brown Eyes, 5'8", went missing on the 20th. Then Evgeny Azipov. Gray Eyes, 5'9", went missing on April 4, 2004. Igor Seltsov follows. Green Eyes, 6'2", went missing on May 6, 2004. Then Artyom Blesyenko, whose face gets blurred. Brown Eyes, 5'9", went missing on the same day as Igor. The last one is Arkady Mantsev. Brown Eyes, 5'7", went missing once again on the 6th of May, 2004. Here the screen starts having a stroke and the word murderer appears over this guy's name. Now, this is a weird thing because I think it's never really explained in the whole series, so I guess just ignore it. We see a quote from Igor's wife. I asked him when he would be back home. At that moment he just smiled at me and replied, much later. Today will be an interesting shift. All these people worked as mechanics at the Shukhov radio tower. And we're off to chapter 2. Noises on Shabolovka. Video by Richard Nielsen. So, the Shukhov radio tower, once again, is a real thing. It was designed by Vladimir Shukhov and built between 1920 and 22. Sometimes it's also called the Shabolovka Tower because it's located on Shabolovka Street in Moscow. We get some quick info about the tower and we're told that it's never been reconstructed. However, in the early 2000s, residents began to complain about the night noise from the radio tower. As you can see, again, the translation is not exactly perfect. Users of Viskontakta, which seems like their version of Kontakte, aka Russian Facebook, thought it was happening tower reconstruction. We get some posts. When I bought an apartment on Shabolovka, I would have never believed that the Shukhov tower was so loud. Smiley face. It's the third night they've been fixing something on that stupid tower. Let me sleep. Did you hear the noise tonight too? What time did you hear it? About 2:34 a.m. And somebody adds, 4:20 a.m. Cheeky. Looks like they've started reconstruction again. It seems to me something exploded. Again, same thing happened a month ago. Then we get a recording of the noises on May 4th. Did you hear that? Thanks, I really needed that clarification. Even though many people thought that the cause of the noise was rebuilding, no official announcement of the reconstruction has not been made. So that's a double negative, whatever. Let's try to get to the Shukhov TV tower. Entrance to the area near the tower is strictly prohibited. I tried to go through the gate, but I was quickly noticed. Surprisingly that the zone of this tower is such a secret area. At the moment, the government of Moscow still no way did not comment on real reason noise at night. Richard Nielsen, 2007. I probably don't have to point this out, but again we have a very un-Slavic name here. Also sorry for the accent, but with that grammar, there's no other way to read it, I think. Chapter 3. Experiments on the Shukhov Tower. We see that its location is a bit towards the south of the city, and we get again the beautiful quote from a moment ago. Whoever is collecting this evidence adds that they found a reason. we're shown another instructional video that we're told was found at the home of one of the missing people. This is another project. Continue experimenting with quantum rays. Change the direction of projection of electron spin onto the back axis. Boy, that sure sounds scientific and shit. We get more ballroom music and see the section launch. And then, attention, in no case should the crown be launched. Which, again, is a bit of a weird translation, I think, because запускать in this context is more like starting up. I don't think that they're literally launching pieces of the tower anywhere. First, we get the installation and see more blueprints. Then we get the tenet, which I'm guessing refers to the principle of the tower's operation. Place a modified object containing metal inside. Run all sections one by one. Transferring data to another tower. Successful transplant. 3. Supervision. We see that there are 3 CCTV cameras, but after some tests, they decided to add a regular camera too. The recordings from the 3rd CCTV camera have been found. Besides recording from CCTV, the camera with tape was found in one of the Moscow parks. Presumably, the following record was from normal camera. So in all of these videos we see the tower being activated, making noise and glimmering like the Oktod tower. In the last one, it is apparent that the regular camera was teleported too. In the course of the investigation, we found that the Shukhov tower was reconstructed at least 9 times, from 1988 to 2004. Contrary to the official version about the state of the tower, in which it is considered to have never been reconstructed. The material of which the tower now consists has nothing to do with what it was originally. And the episode ends with the logo of the Eagle of True, which explains why it was mentioned once more in the description. So, are we to assume that all of the videos we've seen so far have been collected and reposted by this Eagle of True organization? The ones deemed as extremists by the United Russia government? The reasons for this are obvious at this point. Whatever experiments they've been running with teleportation using the towers must have backfired at some point, and the government wants to keep this all under wraps. As some of you probably noticed, there's a lot of Monument Mythos influence even just in all those blueprint scenes, where we get an explanation of the internal workings of the towers. I like how it's all applied to a seemingly smaller scale as opposed to Monument Mythos, which delves into worldwide apocalyptic events. Also, I've mentioned this a few times, but I'm not sure of what to make of the translations provided. There's a lot of errors in some places, even the Eagle of True should probably be of Truth instead. I'm not sure if this is a deliberate choice which shows us that whoever is providing us with this info is not great at English, or if it's just genuine mistakes that the author of the series makes, seeing as other times his grammar seems perfectly correct. Anyway, now we come to the last episode of this project, which clocks in at almost 17 minutes. And it is titled Final Data, like the series itself. It's here that a lot of things will be finally made clear, and it's definitely the peak of the whole thing, if you ask me. Let's get into it and start from the description again. Sergey Brin is a Russian engineer and entrepreneur. In 2013, he created the first successful neural network, Brin 1.0. In 2020, Sergey started working with the Department of Health of the United Russia to create Brin 3.0 for the production of universal SB objects. Later, by 2029, the Brin neural network created a social, economic, and political crisis in the country. In 2030, Sergey created his own project, Infinity, to send a space probe. So, that's a lot of info. What I can point out is the fact that the SB objects we have seen so far have been the ones that the government installed on the towers for their experiments. But out of all of this, I think the most important part is going to be the last, relative to the space probe. We begin with a shaky and noisy video recording in which nothing can really be made out. It might look like the horizon, but seen from a very high altitude. If we look at the timestamps, we see that this is data from Sergey's space probe, Infinity 8. Then we get the first chapter, the only data left of Alexei Rikert. If you remember, Rikert was the guy that filmed the Moscow Mirage, and that by 2030 was said to be in a mental hospital in the experimental territory. We get Moscow Clues Part E. This time there's no English translation, strangely enough, so I'll provide it. This investigation is dedicated to all the innocents that were killed during and from the consequences of the Moscow therapy. January 23rd, 2022. Almost all pieces of evidence were quickly destroyed, except one. It's a recording of a broadcast. January 24th, 2022. In the Central Territory, the state of emergency is declared. Moscow is being evacuated. Besides this, the Ostankino Tower is covered in flames. The following broadcast comes at 9:12, 18 hours after the therapy, if I'm reading this right. The newscaster is talking about the fire enveloping the tower, saying that in 8 hours it spread to half the length of the tower itself. Some funky music starts and we get some more info. According to the official version, the first reports of smoke from the inside of the Ostankino Tower's antenna began at 15:57 Central Time on January 23, 2022. The fire started because of an uncontrollable chain reaction involving all the towers in the city following the therapy. And although there's a lot of myths around the official version, I want to bring your attention to another detail. The only videos of Moscow after the therapy. After the therapy, all mass media were prohibited from entering the zone of the therapy. Moscow became the most restricted zone in the United Russia territories. Even the experimental territory wasn't this restricted. I wonder why. Which, again, the experimental territory thing is a wild throwaway line to just put in there. Let's look once more at the only video from Moscow. Don't you see anything strange in the landscape? Not gonna lie, I was very confused here. Trees covered in leaves. January? What a warm winter, though. And the next line sent me spinning. Does Moscow exist? I think I'm just slowly losing my sanity every time I cover a new analog horror series. We get some quotes from the witnesses of the therapy. It's hard to describe what happened, but I saw how the city changed at that moment. At first I thought that a part of the city was destroyed, probably because of the smog. I was very surprised that none of the buildings were damaged. Many of my friends lost their loved ones. From what I understand, all of those who were in the epicenter of the tower's effect died. The radiation there was so terrible that they couldn't even find the bodies of the deceased. My friend has been asking for a year that they try and find at least something of her parents.
And this last quote was from Alona Cheremis?
Yeah, what's happening right now with this catastrophe is a disgrace. When it started, I was at work. After a deafening sound, nobody understood what was happening. We turn on the news and they're telling everybody to leave the city through special evacuation roads. I lost my daughter. There was no signal. She lived in Chermanova. They immediately told me she died. I demanded the search, but they denied and always tell me the same thing. There's a high level of radiation in the area. What is this bullshit?
And this is from Artur Tavalds. I'm guessing that the already mentioned Sofia Tavalds was his daughter. Then we see another piece of footage from the Infinity 8 space probe, this time looking into a strong source of light. We get to part 2.
Phone call data by...
The callers are Erik Mironov, who seems to be in the Moscow area, and Danil Lukashov, who is all the way in Alaska. For a moment we see a third blue dot, which I think might be positioned in the experimental territory. Danil laments the fact that it's 2 in the morning there in Alaska, and Erik says that he knows, but that he's not in Moscow anymore because they're being evacuated. When Danil asks what happened, Erik says that they activated them. And Danil immediately understands that he's talking about the towers. Erik goes on to tell him about the info we already know, like the radiation and such. But then he adds that he saw something strange. When they escorted him out of his house, he noticed that the streets seemingly ended into nothing. Instead of more streets, there was the sea. But the authorities told him that he just saw things. And suddenly, the phone call gets interrupted and dropped. We see the blue dot appear once more. This time we can confirm that it's in the experimental territory. An automated voice says,
"Sorry, the connection was lost."
I think it's pretty safe to assume that the blue dot represents someone working for the government and monitoring all the calls in order to block people from revealing information about the incident. Also, at this point, it's clear that the Moscow Mirage we saw in Ricard's video might have not been a Mirage at all. And seeing as they were experimenting with teleportation at the towers, when they were all activated, it must have teleported the whole city of Moscow in the middle of the Black Sea. That in itself is already freaking cool, but it's not even the big enchilada yet. In part 3, we get a continuation of Moscow clues by Ricard.
It seems that the picture is starting to become clear. I'll say it outright. The Moscow you saw in the earlier footage is a fake, specifically made with CGI. And before I show you what's actually wrong with Moscow, I want to sort out the broadcast from the 24th of January.
In this section, Ricard basically explains how the footage could have been fake, by just creating a computer simulation of the city, then adding a few VHS and color effects over the images. And then this. Television becomes
the live vision,
written in Comic Sans. I'm going to be honest with you, I howled and clapped the first time around. That's just hilarious. And it was actually this moment that most of all made me realize how self-aware this series is and part of what sealed the deal for me. As I've said before, I love when creators embrace the silliness in stuff like this. Another video from the Infinity 8 probe is shown, this time looking out at the stars. The fourth part is titled
Real Moscow Therapy, data by Sergey Brin,
aka the creator of the space probe and the neural net experiments.
Special Towers, project results.
We see our lovely camera tripod again, the so-called Brin Tower, and we're shown the positions of the other towers when something appears in the middle of the city and the video glitches out. For a moment, a code appears, and if we map the numbers to the Russian alphabet in reverse, we get
Kremlin incident,
which makes sense seeing as it's located at the center of Moscow. Then we're back to normal and see the order in which the towers are activated. But we see that the Brin Tower activates too early, and its radius is huge. In this way, it seems to have basically overcharged the other two towers, teleporting the part of the city under their radius. We then get another shot from the space probe. As we can see, it has been traveling for a monstrous amount of time, but it seems to have finally found a planet. Is that Earth? Did it come back? So we arrive at part 5, the last piece of the Moscow clues.
Real pictures of Moscow in 2028. Moscow is irradiated. So say all the states in the world. Even satellite imaging services showed this. But here's how the real pictures look. The Moscow River became a lake. Remember when I was in DP and saw the Mirage of Moscow? It was no mirage. After this video, Alexei Rikert was tried and sentenced to 7 years of imprisonment. The investigation confirmed his involvement in the extremist organization Eagle of True and the dissemination of anti-Russian propaganda. In 2029, he was judged unfit for trial and moved to a psychiatric clinic in the experimental territory. The fate of the people in this psychiatric clinic is still unknown. The video was re-uploaded by Richard Nielsen in 2029.
Which, if you remember, is the same guy from the Shabolovka Noises video. And so we get to the final part, aptly named Final Data. We see the Infinity 8 approaching the ground. Then the data is being loaded. We get a presentation. We see our Earth, from which the Infinity 8 is sent, loaded with a videotape.
After an infinite amount of time, your Earth. Pass this data on to your leaders. Don't allow this to happen in your world.
So that ending was honestly great. There is something so satisfying about a creator managing to tie everything into a neat package right at the end of a project. Which is also something quite typical of the Monument Mythos, by the way. From this, everything is pretty much put into perspective. We realize that all of the action was taking place in a sort of alternate universe, which was pretty clear from the start, but that we have access to it in our world, because somehow people from that reality managed to send a probe with all of this information to us. This is their final data. Also, it seems that Sergey Brin is responsible for the design of the tripod towers, but also for the launch of the space probe. Does that mean that he regrets his work on the towers and its consequences and wants to warn others? Or maybe that he didn't know what they would be used for? I think I don't need to reiterate all that happened up to this point because it should be quite clear. But there are obviously more questions that we could ask ourselves. For one, are all of the people responsible for these videos connected to the Eagle of True? And is that even a real thing, or is it just a boogeyman that the government made up to, cover up the whole thing? Well, there's a bunch of loose ends in this sense, but I think there's no need to get hung up on it. You see, Final Data is a project by Michael Williams, which, by the way, that's definitely not his real name, who seems to be an aspiring filmmaker with a bunch of projects in store. The guy seems to be quite young, and some of the stuff he made is quite amateurish, but honestly, that just makes me respect him much more. Because it seems that with every new project, he's getting better and better at his craft. Go check out his Galacticus channel if you're curious. A new film called Asymmetry is about to be released very soon on there, I think. Final Data was just a stop along his creative journey. He admits that he wanted to experiment a little bit with the analog horror format. But he also says that while it was interesting, he doesn't see himself coming back to it. He started this series randomly, on a whim, and he thought about making it longer and more in-depth, but at one point he realized that he just wasn't that into it. So he decided instead to give it some closure and end it there. The thing is, I've seen much worse when it comes to analog horror. Final Data actually managed to intrigue me, especially at the end. It also takes some guts to randomly experiment with analog horror and choose the Monument Mythos as your point of inspiration. Which, by the way, the author says that in his mind this was just a Russian reimagining of the Monument Mythos. All the elements were there for this to fall apart at any moment, but surprisingly enough, I think he did a pretty good job. And for me, this is what analog horror is all about, and I've been saying this since my first video. It's a format that gives young creators with zero budget and a dream the chance to experiment with filmmaking and the creation of a narrative work of fiction in an already established genre. And it's so cool to see little-known creators like these, and even the big names in the genre, move forward and make new stuff while retaining and just building on what they learned while making these projects. Lastly, I wanted to mention how often in analog horror the government is either the bad guy or in some way involved into some conspiracy against the people. This is especially true for all of these Russian analog horror series that I've covered. And I don't intend to discuss politics because it's a waste of my time, but just looking at how the world is today and the kind of shit that our governments get up to, it kinda warms my heart to see how many young artistic people show some form of distrust against the powers that be in their work. Stay punk, kiddos! So once again, if you feel like it, please go show some support to the creator. The links will be down there. Have a good one, and see you, space probes.